because these AI characters are now capable of simulating an extremely realistic back and forth communication. And going back to that age reference, for a child, it's even more difficult to differentiate a real person from an AI character.
Welcome to the first episode of the Engagement Architect podcast. I'm your host, Chris Bennett. For this portion of each episode, I'll be talking about things that are relevant to my work that you might find useful. But for this pilot episode, I want to step back and talk briefly about why I even started this podcast. I've spent much of my career in game design and development, while also studying behavior design and neuroscience. And these are all fields that all ask the same question in different ways. What truly drives human engagement and motivation? And that's why I created this show. In each episode, I'll talk with fascinating people from different fields like education, entrepreneurship, neuroscience, and the arts. And together we'll explore what they've learned about capturing attention, sustaining motivation, and creating experiences that really matter. I call myself an engagement architect because I believe engagement isn't an accident. It's something that we can design with structure and creativity across contexts as different as classrooms, games, startups, or even family life. For this first episode, I wanted to begin with someone who embodies both rigor and playfulness. I think you'll really enjoy this discussion I had with Dr. Sonia Tiwari as we dove into her research on AI characters, emotions, and engagement, and also talk about what parents and educators should keep in mind as new technologies shape how kids learn and grow. So let's get started. So today, I'm thrilled to welcome Dr. Sonia Tiwari to the Engagement Architect podcast. Sonia is a children's media researcher, and she explores how characters, everywhere from books to AI chatbots, can inspire learning and creativity and connection. She has her MFA in character animation and a PhD in learning, design, and technology. She's been an adjunct professor, a consultant for children's educational products, and she's one of just 20 scientists selected for the Falling Walls Foundation Female Science Talents Intensive Track. I've known Sonia for several years, and she's one of the rare people I know who blends rigorous research with a real sense of creativity and wonder about the world. Sonia, thank you so much, and welcome to this pilot episode of The Engagement Architect.
Thank you. I mean, I feel super happy to be one of the first guests, and you're the absolute perfect person to talk about engagement across many dimensions.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So I'm curious, what got you interested in this field? What was your journey like?
Yeah, so I was always the creative kid in school. I was undiagnosed dyslexic, so I was just naturally drawn to simplifying text in alternative ways. But I also look at it as a superpower in a way to find alternative ways to learn. I was drawn to film school in undergrad because it felt like I wasn't doing well in the traditional written tests and exams. I knew that for college, I wanted to pick a major that was more hands on and creative. I loved film school because your final assignment is to make a film or produce a documentary or write a script, all creative stuff. I just thrived in that kind of creative environment. So I knew that for my master's also, I wanted to continue that creative path. And I moved from live action to animation because I think animation gives you even more freedom to express yourself. You control every aspect of the world building and the visual design, audio, everything. I thrived there and then worked in the gaming industry as a character designer for a while. And our game studios had an internal research team, and we had conversations around, well, I'm designing a character. How can I make it more apt for a child of this age versus that age? I didn't have the vocabulary of developmental appropriateness because I came from the design world. And so those researchers introduced me to child development, early childhood education, and how it impacts our users who were children. Many years later, that's why I went back to school because I was excited to learn the reasoning behind design, the developmental science behind design. So there's a large gap between my master's and PhD, which is uncommon, but I think it worked in my favor because I had a more practical outlook to research. Like we see the world from how can research impact our reality as opposed to how can we publish for the sake of publishing.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing some of your background. I want to start to dig into some of these terms that we're going to talk about just so we're all on the same page. When we talk about children today, I think someone who's between the ages of 0 and 17, is there more of a sweet spot or a tighter age range when you're speaking of children, or are you really talking about children of all ages?
I mostly work with early childhood education, so it's under the age of 8, in some context up to age 10. But yeah, that's usually my sweet spot.
When we talk about artificial intelligence or AI characters, what do we really mean? Like, what are we talking about when we say it's an AI character as opposed to a character that a kid might see on TV or might see in a graphic novel in a book or might even encounter in a video game? What makes it different?
I think it's the two-way realistic conversation that makes it different. The term parasocial was initially introduced with the one-sided emotional connection that we have with characters. This was more in context of linear media like film and television and advertising. And then there came the terminology of parasocial interaction. Sandra Calvert is one of the main researchers there, and that was in context of interactive characters. And she even started researching some of the early AI interactions. But the AI characters of today, many people argue that it's gone beyond parasocial or pseudo-social. It's turning out to be really social because these AI characters are now capable of simulating an extremely realistic back and forth communication. And going back to that age reference, for a child, it's even more difficult to differentiate a real person from an AI character. Characters interact with each other to create some kind of emotion. So all of that carries over in AI characters, and the only difference being that instead of a one-sided curated view of the character provided by a character designer or a game designer, this almost feels like you fed in the foundations of communication into a block of code, and now it's capable of simulating these realistic conversations.
I was reading a post that you had about a recent presentation that you did at MIT, and I love the thoughtful question that you noted where I think somebody asked whether anthropomorphizing was harmful for kids or not. Can you sum up a bit the answer that you gave?
It is, I think, like to have a one sentence kind of prescription that don't anthropomorphize and everything will be fine. That would be oversimplifying the issue. So the thing that concerns most educators, researchers, caregivers is the over dependence on AI characters or AI becoming a stand-in for real relationships. And so that problem is very systemic. If we don't give enough attention to children, if we don't hold a non judgmental space for them, they are going to seek out help elsewhere. And right now, AI happens to be that convenient option that if there's no one else to talk to, might as well talk to AI. And even younger kids who don't have phones still have access to their tablets, and parents may not closely monitor the kind of apps that they are downloading. And then there are smart speakers and social robot toys like the Dino toy. So kids may not have phones, but they have other ways to talk to these AI characters. As humans, tend to anthropomorphize a lot of things, even inanimate objects. It's a quirky thing that a lot of us do. So that alone is not the problem. The problem is isolation, not having alternative support systems, not having access to a safe space, not having non judgmental people around you who are willing to hear you out. And so if we don't address the main issues and only talk about anthropomorphizing, that's not a balanced conversation.
And when we talk about kids, young people talking to AI, what does it mean? How are they actually interacting with AI in a different way than they might if they were playing some game on their iPad or if they were talking to their friends either in real life or virtually?
Yeah, so I'll take the example of the Miko social robot or
Hmm.
AI toy. So it appears like any other toy, has a cute look to it, feels like a regular toy, but then kids can have open-ended conversations to it. Like, let's build a story together, or can you play a song or tell me a story? Or even asking interest-based questions that what's the fastest animal or what's the capital of this country? So it's very open-ended. Some kids build routines around it that as soon as they come back from school, they will talk to their favorite AI toy about how their day was. And I've done conversation analysis of social media videos that parents have shared, what the conversations kids are having. Initially, it sounds ideal that, oh, good to know your day was nice. If it ended there, it might have been okay. But the conversation patterns in these AI characters that are designed for kids usually ends in some kind of loop that lures kids back into the conversation. So it's not just that glad to know your day was okay. It's tell me more. What was the best thing that happened? Then the child says that, oh, what's something not nice that happened today? And who's your friend? It's a never ending conversation and it's highly unstructured. Whereas a good example would be Buddy AI tutor aimed at Latin American children who are trying to learn English. So right off the bat, it has a very specific goal that it's language learning for this particular audience. And so it's not like, hey, buddy, how was your day today? It's more like, let's learn about names of colors in English today. So it's very goal oriented. And an average tutoring session is 10 to 15 minutes. So it has a definite end as opposed to an open ended chatbot or a smart speaker where kids can go on forever. But it can be by design. Toybot, for example, is also a smart AI character meant for kids and it looks like a plush toy. It's a robot plush toy, and it's fitted with the Amazon Echo Dot. That one, even though it's a smart speaker and even though it's open-ended in some sense, it has like semi-structured conversation. So it's not meant to bring kids back into the conversation beyond a point. If a child has asked a question, it just answers and then stops. Or you can even do family games. It pairs with a smart board. So you can put the toy there and you can bring on a family member or a friend and play a board game kind of facilitated by audio from the robot. So it's actually nurturing human connection and just being a very subtle facilitator in the background.
So, speaking of ethical AI characters, let's dig into that a bit. Because you have a really instructive framework around the scale of child AI interaction. I wonder if you could walk us through that and talk about what problematic conversation hooks look like in this context.
As a consultant, I work with a lot of ed tech companies who are trying to design AI characters to support their content. And so we divide the design process into three buckets is the child, character, and the interaction between them. With everything in education, we begin with the context of the child, their age, what is developmentally appropriate, what is their cultural context, their neurodiversity, all of that good stuff that's important to remember. And then we start thinking about that, okay, what kind of character might appeal to this child or support this child? So we start thinking about the character design factors like the visual form, the kind of voice that we want, and the format that we want. That if it's, for example, a very young child who's not literate yet, we might want an audio based interface. So a smart speaker or a social robot might work better for them. Whereas older children who know how to type, have access to a personal device, may have more text based chatbots or more screen based interfaces, for example. And then finally, the interaction factors, that kind of things What is the bridge between the character and the child? How are they going to interact? One of the things is the scale that you were talking about. So the scale of child AI interaction is divided in four levels. At the first level, a child is just seeking information, it's just simple information retrieval, like how's the weather, what's the capital, those kind of asked and answered questions. Then there's light parasocial interaction. And I'm personally now, after feedback from the MIT AI Summit, I'm deviating away from the terminology parasocial because, like I said, a lot of researchers argue now that parasocial was relevant when AI was not so strong. So now I just say light interaction instead of light parasocial
Okay.
interaction. So light interaction, like with the example of Buddy AI, where you are giving this character a name and there is some kind of back and forth, but it's still within the realm of a goal and it's not too intense. Like you ask maybe one or two follow-up questions. And then on the higher end of that scale is relationship and companionship, as we have seen with teenagers, the obsession with chatbots, like they're always talking to them, or with young kids, talking to social robots for hours, for example. Whatever you want to learn, it does not need to be a day long back and forth conversation. Within time, with a specific goal, with some kind of semi structured conversation, it's enough. And on the higher end, it is those sticky chat patterns. And I'm working with this researcher, Jennifer Shen, and we are going deeper into these sticky chat patterns that what are the red flags that we see in conversation patterns where it's clearly not that helpful. And so, to your earlier question about what those patterns are, some examples are like ending each conversation with another question or ending each conversation with a cliffhanger that we are bound to ask a follow up question.
I was struck by something you said a couple of minutes ago about sometimes you want, as a parent or a caregiver or even a teacher, you want to soothe them in the moment, but yet that's not building their coping and resiliency skills. Do you have any thoughts around where is a sweet spot for that, especially with an AI character?
If we are even letting children interact with these AI characters to suit themselves, could it be redesigned in a way that a family member or a friend or some other human is involved in that process? So again, like Toybot is a great example for that. Even if a child is bored or frustrated and they want some kind of interaction with their toy, there are pathways for both individual and joint engagement in Toybot. So there are some activities that you can do alone. There are some audio adventures that you can participate in with your family. Shifting more towards that joint engagement model could be a safer sweet spot.
So let's switch gears a little bit. I know you've been doing some more recent work on dual empathy. I'd love to hear how that came about and for you to dig into it a little bit because I find it super fascinating.
In 2016, there was this amazing research article that came out with this term called dual empathy. And they were looking at examples in movies where whenever there's like a beloved character, they try to understand why is that character so beloved and why do certain scenes gain so much popularity. For example, Captain Kirk saying goodbye to a dying Spock in Star Trek, or Darth Vader revealing that I'm your father, or the prisoner escaping in the rain in Shawshank Redemption. Those were the kind of examples they had in that article. And they said that the first empathy we have is for the character itself, that, oh, this guy struggles so much, and then finally this thing happened. But then there's a secondary empathy that we feel for something autobiographical. So that moment when Spock is dying, a lot of people remember someone they loved who passed away in real life. And it's a way to process their grief through reflection on that character and then relating it back to their own life. Darth Vader saying, I'm your father. Sure, a lot of us know who our fathers are, but it's also a moment of revealing a big part of your identity that was missing for a long time. So it may not exactly be the same parallel that, Luke finds out who his father is and I found out who my father was. It's more like for a long time, like my dyslexia diagnosis in a way that there was a piece missing in my life. Maybe I was not smart enough to succeed in K-12, but now I have this diagnosis that explains a lot of things, that I thrived in certain environments, and that's a revelation of identity. So I'm your father is replaced with, hey, it's dyslexia. So, so then I started thinking that we all have these relational moments with movies. Well, this has psychological benefits for sure, that it allows us the space to process our emotions. It's also a form of emotional rehearsal where the audience can walk through the feelings in the context of a fictional story. And then it's a safe space for understanding and insight and processing some kind of emotion because it's all fictional. So we can do this mental exercise of how different scenarios played out for similar characters or people in similar situations as us. And so I started thinking, how can I build on this research in the context of learning? That what if we could empathize with a character related to something autobiographical, but then use that feeling as momentum to do something towards learning? So, for example, a child reads a book about STEM or engineering, like the Rosie Revere Engineer children's book, and sees a person of color doing all these amazing engineering things, something that they may not see celebrated as often as it should be. And then eventually that would inspire them to pursue a career in engineering. So that empathy can be put into action towards maybe taking some coding camps or summer camps, picking more technology related elective, and then going to school for engineering. So all of this empathy can lead us to something in context of education. And that's where I'm interested now in focusing my research on, that characters can produce empathy, but how can we bank on it for learning?
Can you give some examples of this that you've seen that have been particularly interesting to you?
I did a survey where I asked people to reflect on a character they liked in their childhood. Why did they relate with it? And then, because these are grown-ups now reflecting on their childhood, putting it in past tense and like connecting the dots and seeing if that character had anything to do with their present day career or career choices. Only 20% people said that, yeah, I liked such and such character, but it had no effect on my career or choices. But overwhelmingly, like 80% people did refer to characters from their childhood that gave them some emotional support, but also gave them the way forward in their learning experiences.
And so we've been talking about some obvious red flags examples here, especially things around harm. But even thinking about things that are more neutral, it seems to me that a lot of AI chatbots are by design trying to reduce friction. They want to make it easier to have the conversation, easier to get access to information, easier to continue the conversation. Yet, the way that human interactions go is friction is inherent in it, in a human interaction. You have to deal with a real person who has real opinions, who has real feelings. They may not agree with you, and they may have different ways of expressing those disagreements. People may be respectful to you or disrespectful to you. Again, we've only been watching this revolution happen for 3 years or so, but almost on the weekly and monthly basis, it's amazing how much better these chatbots are getting constantly. And it seems like they're not adding friction to the system, but they're removing friction from it to make it easier. Do you have any thoughts on reducing friction around chatbots and what that means to be human?
If we reflect on our own K-12 experience, whoever our best friends were, or even as adults, like friends we have had for more than 10, 12 years, there are always times where we can remember that we're not cordial. We had some kind of argument, we had some kind of falling out, but then we made up, came back together. And so we don't have that, like you said, AI is currently built around being polite, kind of agreeing with you. And in psychology, it's called psychophancy, where someone says extremely flattering, praising, agreeable things. So there's no pushback. And so some people prompt, like in ChatGPT, let's say I wrote an academic research article, and before I turn it in, I want some kind of feedback to reduce the review time. Sometimes I upload a draft or an outline of what I'm thinking and ask ChatGPT that, well, assume you're an editor. What do you think about this outline? Does it make sense? Sometimes I'll get pushback then, like if I prompt for pushback. If I just said that, oh, here's an outline, what do you think? It will say, oh, this looks great, and this is taking the field forward and give me this fake sense of achievement. And for young children too, like the multimodal kind of tools, let's say a child makes a drawing, and if a social robot has ability to see and the child is showing them their artwork, asking how is it, it is going to give a positive feedback in a way as it should because we don't want like a social robot to break a child's confidence, but also it's not going to give. If it was shown to an art teacher, they would do the sandwich method where they're like, oh, this looks amazing, how about you try this also in your next one, and so a
Hmm.
gentle way to take them forward. That may not be the case with AI. I think right now the workaround is prompting AI to give you critique, or for young kids, best way is joint engagement because parents can or an educator can intervene and see where a child is receiving completely false or superficial feedback and then layer it with the reality in their professional way. Teachers are the professionals here. They know how to give feedback without breaking a child's spirit. So if they are involved in some kind of joint engagement, then they can overtake where they need to.
When I talk to parents and when I talk to teachers, the sense of AI is almost universally overwhelming. They don't know what to think about it. A lot of them don't even use it in their work in their daily life. It's just one of those things that's sitting over there that they keep reading articles about and watching on TV. What do you feel parents and caregivers and teachers should really know about balancing AI's potential with its risks as far as children go?
In public school system, kids are given Chromebooks in kindergarten and they have access to iPads at home. A lot of the working parents don't have childcare options. So even if they know that just giving their child an iPad whenever they need to take a break is not a good idea, sometimes that's their reality. And so kids have access to devices and they are not always monitored. They don't have a parent who is always willing to join them in some kind of joint engagement experience. And so that is the reality. So families need to know that even if you don't actively introduce children to AI, chances are that when you're not aware, they might be introduced to it. So why not proactively have that conversation about safety upfront? We say that stranger danger, and well, that stranger could also be AI. It doesn't have to be a person. So developing this muscle of not trusting anything and everything easily is essential. Even this conversation about what's a good use of AI and what's not a good, okay use of AI. If we need help, why don't we both ask this AI tutor together? If you're not understanding some part of the homework, let's not ask for the answer, but let's ask this to explain the process or give us clues as to what the next thing might be so we don't compromise those critical thinking skills. We might not say critical thinking, but even young kids understand that we don't want someone to just give you the answer because then you won't learn how to do it yourself. So I think people assume that young kids, like this age group, 4 to 8, people assume that, oh, they won't understand critical thinking or they won't understand AI or versus not AI. But believe me, when I do these interviews and exercises with kids, when I'm product testing with kids, they are pretty smart and they are right to question. And they even ask those AI robots directly that, are you real? Where are you from? And so some products ethically have that transparency built in that they say that, oh, I'm just a program. I'm not a person. I don't have feelings. And then there are some deceiving chatbots who pretend to have this elaborate backstory without mentioning that this is all fictional. That's what parents need to understand, that have that conversation proactively now to prevent a lot of potential harm in the future.
One more question. In the next few years, where do you see engagement and motivation going?
I feel like people will be looking for more in-person and real world and offline engagement, even more so in the age of AI. I think it's oversaturating our lives. Like even AI tools that somehow create more prompts for or space for real connection are going to be more popular. If there are AI tools that make that possible, let's say if I'm going to struggle for an hour in front of a screen to do something, and if AI can optimize that task in a way that I have more time left over for other real world things, ideally that's the direction we should go.
Well, thank you for ending on that hopeful note. Sonia, thank you so much for sharing your time and insights. I really love how you blend deep research with really practical ways to bring joy and creativity into learning. And for our listeners, we'll have links to Sonia's work and resources in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Chris.
I think you can see why I wanted Sonia as my very first guest. What I took away from our conversation is that engagement is not just about technology or design. It's also about empathy. The way we create characters, stories, and experiences can either connect us more deeply or leave us more isolated. And while I'm a big proponent of adults using AI as a superpower to extend our own abilities, there are also serious concerns we need to be aware of when allowing children, and especially very young kids, to use AI on their own. Sonia's point about looking at AI solutions for children that affords a bounded and focused experience really resonated with me in a world where technology and social media is often designed from the beginning to engage users as long as possible. And our discussion of friction as an important part of engagement reminded me that friction is a tool that can be used in multiple ways. Imagine yourself riding a bicycle. If you keep your hand on the brakes the whole time, you won't be going very far. But when you're racing down a hill, that same brake is suddenly become very useful to you. And to be honest, for most of the parents and teachers I speak to, Gen AI currently feels to them like they're racing down a steep hill, but with a blindfold on. And by using the AI tools that are out there and learning how they work with others, we can take that blindfold off and learn how to steer and use the brakes. And I would urge anyone to access and use these AI tools on a regular basis to learn, because the children and students who rely on you certainly are. Thank you for listening to the very first episode of the Engagement Architect podcast. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube and leave a review. It really helps. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn, where I share ideas and frameworks on motivation and design. And stay tuned, we've got some amazing guests coming up, including entrepreneurs, educators, scientists, and creatives, all with unique perspectives on what makes us engaged, motivated, and alive. I'm your host, Chris Bennett. Thank you for joining me on this journey.